This is a celebration day on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. I'm Debbie Georgiani, along with Jerry Usher. And we would like you to join us today as we honor, as we celebrate the life, the amazing life and the sainthood of Saint Padre Pio. That's right, Saint Padre Pio. Wow. Those of you who love him, you're going to want to call in and share how he has been active in your spiritual walk. He's an amazing saint. He's one of my favorite, Jerry. And I'm going to give the number because we know by Facebook it's reached so many of you, thousands of you, that you obviously have stuff to say about Padre Pio, and we want to hear it at 1-800-585-9396. Jerry, is Saint Pio of Pietrelcina, is he one of your favorites?
Well, he's a favorite of so many people. Yeah, absolutely. You hear so many great and these remarkable stories about him, the miracles and the stigmata that he had. And so there's a lot of, I think, a lot of intrigue, Debbie, in a saint like this. And if I remember right, you probably know more about him than I do because you were both Italian, you
That's
and Padre
right.
Pio.
That's right.
And I'm not part of the Italian club.
But you like Italian food.
I do. I love Italian food, especially yours,
go.
Debbie. You and Marty make great Italian food.
Thank you.
But what was I going to say? Oh, the one thing that he didn't he have the ability to read souls?
Read hearts,
confession?
yeah. Absolutely. Hearts? He did. He would. Yeah, go ahead.
You know, what's weird about that is he and St. John Vianney and other priests, and we hear that people waited in line for hours to go to confession to them. And I don't know. I look at it this way. I think if a priest had the ability to read my soul, I'd probably turn and run the other way.
Well, actually, it's interesting you should say that, Jerry, because it's my understanding, and I have read a lot about Padre Pio, and yes, and actually in one of my talks on angels, I brought in his relationship that he had with angels. He had them ever since he was a small child. In fact, he would talk to the angels. He would talk to Jesus and Mary, and he thought that all other kids could see the angels and see. He just thought it was natural. That's what Padre Pio, how it became so easily his relationship building with the divine and all the elements in heaven. He absolutely had that connection at age 5. That's why at age 5 he went to his parents and he decided he was going to devote his whole life to God. So you're talking age 5 years old. Think about that. As parents, you have a 5-year-old. Can you imagine they're talking to angels and Jesus and Mary at a very young age and just thinking it's absolutely normal, and which it is actually. It's open to all of us. But you're right, Jerry. It's interesting because he would hear 10 hours of confessions, I believe, a day, and people would go in and not, I guess, purposely or maybe they forgot, they wouldn't mention a certain sin. And there was reports that Padre Pio, you could hear him yelling and scolding them and basically saying, get out of the confessional, and when you finally, fess up to what you're really hiding, come on back in. And they would come back, Jerry. I don't know if I could handle that. I would be mortified. I think I'd leave and just, I don't know, get on the next plane and head back to the United States.
Wouldn't he also, though, sometimes just remind people, oh, and by the way, you also need to confess
yes,
such and such. Yeah.
Yes, and it used to startle people. I mean, I can't even imagine that. I think I would just go in maybe and just say, okay, I confess everything.
You know everything,
That's
Padre
right.
Pio. Just give me absolution.
Right.
Oh, and my penance too.
And the penance, yeah. But isn't that amazing? I mean, you're right, and you shared about the gifts he has, gifts he had, and I say has because he's in eternal life, and he actually said he was going to do more work now, being having died, than when he was alive, and he has. So many people, even myself, Jerry, I have several instances where I asked for the intercession of Padre Pio for really extreme cases, and I really believe he came through, and it's just amazing. But here are some of the gifts that he was given to, God gave him. The gift of healing, bilocation. That's one of the most ancient gifts in the church. St. Anthony of Padua had the gift of bilocation as well. Levitation, prophecy, miracles, stigmata, reading hearts, Jerry. That's what you're talking about. The gift of tongues, gift of conversions. He had the fragrance in the stigmata. I don't know if a lot of people realize that. Although the stigmata is the wounds of Christ, when you're given that gift by God, it's painful. But his were perfectly circular, and they would smell like roses. roses. It was unbelievable. So there's so many things about Padre Pio. You can hear the passion in my voice. I absolutely am so happy we're doing this show on his feast day. The church assigns different days in the liturgical year of our church calendar, and this day is the day that Padre Pio entered into heaven. September 23rd was when he died, after the day before he said his last mass. And if I understand it correctly, Jerry, he, right when he took his last breath, he saw his mother and Mary coming for him, and his last words were to Maria. Isn't that beautiful?
That's very beautiful. There's so much about this great saint we celebrate today. Do you have a memory of him? Maybe you're old enough to have actually visited Padre Pio in San Giovanni Rotondo, or maybe you have a relic of his or a favorite story. Call and share your take. Maybe you've had his intercession be of help to you. 1-800-585-9396. There's so much, Debbie, that we can go into, and we don't have the time. We want to hear about it from our listeners, but he was obviously holy, prayerful. I understand he would start his day at 2:30 in the morning. He would get up, prayed so very, very much. Miracles followed him around. And then there was also, of course, the great obedience. This is most of all, Debbie, I think what would qualify him for sainthood was, if I'm not mistaken, his obedience, because wasn't he either silenced or told not to publicly minister for a while because there were questions about some of the reports of things going on?
Absolutely. It just spread like wildfire throughout Italy and around the world, actually. And yes, Jerry, when he received the stigmata, it's my understanding, and from when I studied about him, that he was asked by his superiors to remain in private ministry, not public ministry, because there was so much happening. But then that was all lifted, that was all changed. He was humiliated, I have to tell you, and he endured it so beautifully. I mean, first of all, he was humiliated by the fact that the stigmata would bleed. And when I was actually at San Giovanni Rotondo, where he died, and there's a beautiful hospital there that he built to alleviate the suffering of people. I think there's like 350 beds in this beautiful hospital, and where he lived in it's like a cell. It is so, oh my goodness, I can't even explain it. I don't know if I could live in it. And he lived in this one room, and they have the altar cloths where the stigmata would drip blood, Jerry. And so there was a lot. You probably have to realize this, that there was probably all this, well, what do we do? He's dripping blood. Is it never got infected. And so the superiors, you're right, Jerry, they pulled him back from public ministry. And so but he obeyed, and he didn't fight, and he did exactly what he was told. And then when they lifted it, then it just spread all across the world. Actually, people were hearing of Padre Pio. I mean, he died in 1968, so you would consider him a contemporary saint, because we were alive when he died. So he was walking around when our parents were walking around, and so it was interesting. So a lot of people heard about him, and you're right, Jerry. He was very obedient, and we can learn from that.
Yeah, so many lessons we can take away, and we're going to get to your takes here in just a moment. 1-800-585-9396. There wasn't a lot of Catholic radio at the time that Padre Pio was alive, and that's probably why he never listened to the radio and never read a newspaper, and he even cautioned his spiritual children against watching television. Boy, what would he say in our day other than EWTN and a few other decent options. Good to have you with us. Take two with Jerry and Debbie. What's your take on Saint Padre Pio? Today is his feast day.
To get your DVD of the 2016 EWTN Family Celebration special tribute to the life and legacy of Mother Mary Angelica, including the addresses by Raymond Arroyo, Janet Vankovic, Father Wade Menezes, Jim and Joy Pinto, and the special family show, log on to our web store, EWTNRC.com, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and type in item HDA 16 or call 1-800-854-6316.
EWTN Radio Classics is our 24/7 teaching and devotionals channel, straight from the EWTN archives. Go classic with EWTN Radio Classics, online at EWTNradio.net. Now available on the EWTN app.
Coming up later today on Cresta in the Afternoon. Our topics during Cresta in the afternoon toggle between church teaching and then using that teaching to shine a light on our world. We'll look at Christ in culture, church and world, religion and public life, from abortion to Zechariah and everything in between. Biblical criticism, Hollywood productions, academic debate, family and love, prayer and spirituality.
Cresta in the afternoon, later today on EWTN Radio.
Hello, this is Bishop Robert Baker from the Diocese of Birmingham in Alabama.
I'm Peggy Normandin, but you can call me Catholic.
Hello, friends. This is Father Wade Menezes of the Fathers of Mercy. Thanks for listening to the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
Welcome, friends. This is Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. We're celebrating the feast day of Padre Pio. So if you love Padre Pio, don't hesitate. Like so many of your friends are calling in. So if there's an open phone line, jump in when we let someone go on with their day. You can jump into that next line that's open. One thing I just wanted to share, that John Paul II canonized Padre Pio in 2002. And there were hundreds of thousands of people that filled St. Peter's Square. Absolutely beautiful. And don't forget, Padre Pio, the quote that's always attributed to Padre Pio is pray, hope, and don't worry. Pray, hope, and don't worry. Don't forget those three.
What a message for today, huh?
What a message for today. Isn't that amazing? Yes, you're right. You're right. Pray, hope, and don't worry. Okay, who's up? Mr. Frost in Massachusetts. Welcome to Take Two with Jerry and Debbie.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Frost. I'm calling from Worcester, Massachusetts, where there was a relics of the saint at the Lowell, Massachusetts, at Immaculate Conception Church, all day on the 21st, and it was a packed house. And for a new Catholic like myself, I know it's we need that type of visualization, the prayer. It's so great to have those things come around. And if you, I want you to take on this reading about him. He acknowledged weekly confessions as a stronger body of Christ than the monthly or yearly confessions. What do you think?
First of all, Mr. Frost, are you referring to, we had heard that his heart was going to be transferred from San Giovanni Rotondo to the Boston area for his, leading up to his feast day. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes. His relic there was the church in Lowell. And then the next day, the 22nd, it went to a church in the north end of Boston.
Okay. And what exactly did you see in this relic? Did you actually, could you get close enough to the relic?
Yes. As a new Catholic, I asked someone in front of me, what do you do when you bow your head, and some people kiss the relic, and then you have a prayer. And you sit down afterwards for half an hour or so and get the spirit of the saint.
Beautiful.
And,
Beautiful.
But reading about him, what about this? His writings about confession and weekly confession versus monthly or yearly.
Right. He recommended weekly confession, daily communion, and examination of conscience. And the reason being is because what I remember from studying it is he wanted all of us to constantly be improving our faith walk, improving our spirituality, and helping, and the sacraments help that. Confession and communion, it helps us to very much grow in holiness and to improve those things that we all struggle with. And so he was a firm believer in recommending that for all of us. So yes, that's what he suggested, because he would say all the time, we have all these things that we fight with. We may have anger issues, and we may have certain vices that we're trying to overcome. And how do you do it? Well, lean on God for that. Lean on the sacraments for that. And that's what his remedy was for all of us. So I hope that helps, Mr. Frost.
Well, yeah, and plus, Debbie, you may have touched on this, but we have to remember that confession is not just to remove sin, but it also provides grace. There is grace to build us up in those virtues and to give us strength against future temptations. So there's more to the sacrament than just simply kind of walking and having a hose kind of spray you off and then you're on your way. But
exactly,
it's really an infusion of God's life. We get more of His life and more of His grace and strength. So hope that helps, Mr. Frost. We got jam-packed phone lines. No surprise today as we talk about St. Padre Pio on his feast feast day. Thank you for the call from Massachusetts. We appreciate that. Jill is next, listening on the Station of the Cross to EWTN Radio in New York. Hi, Jill. Thank you for calling.
Hi. I called your station once before your program.
Well, we're glad to have you back. What are your thoughts on St. Padre Pio?
Well, my fraternity of the Secular Franciscan Order is reading the story about his life, the true life of Padre Pio. And I read in that book, he got the stigmata on September 7th, 1910, correct? That was in the book.
I believe so. It was 1910. I'll double check, but keep talking, and I'll let you know in just a second.
Yeah, it's in the book that we're reading.
Yeah, September 20th, 1910 is what I'm showing right here.
It says September 7th.
Okay. I'm sorry. I have September. I'll double check that, but it's 1910 is correct. So keep going, Joe.
Actually,
Okay.
one site that I'm
involved-
looking at has September 20th, 1918. So
Okay. There you go. So that's what happens.
but it
with
did
Padre.
happen. That's the important thing.
Yes.
Sorry, Jill.
Actually, it was said that he went to his superiors with the stigmata on September 7th, 1910. And that was the first time he went to his superiors about it. So on September 7th, 1995, I was involved in a head-on collision in South Carolina. And the only reason that I survived that accident was because just before impact, I looked up to heaven and I said, God, I hope I survive this. I have a nurse practitioner. I was telling her the story of Padre Pio and his link to my accident. And she said, perhaps the Lord sent down not only your guardian angel, but Padre Pio to help you through the accident. And his feast day was the same day as my wedding day in 1989.
Is that right?
Yes, and he died September 23rd, 1968. And that's 4 months to the day from the day that I was actually born.
Wow. So
wow,
you have
a lot of connections there.
I was just going to say that you have a lot of connections to Padre Pio. You should feel blessed. That's awesome, and he's working in your life, and he interceded when you needed it most. That is beautiful, Jill. We're glad you sound strong. We're glad you're with us, and sounds like you keep talking.
One more thing.
Yes, go
One
ahead.
more thing.
Go ahead.
My friend Nancy and I are being professed tonight in our church sanctuary on Padre Pio's feast day, and it's going to be. I'm going to take his saint name for my saint name.
Beautiful.
I can only say Saint Pio, not Padre Pio, because apparently you got to be a priest to say Padre Pio.
So you're going to be professed as what, secular Franciscans?
Secular.
Okay.
Wow.
Wow, that's fantastic.
That's awesome.
Congratulations to you and your friend.
Yes. And Jill, keep us posted how that's going and how you're still sharing Padre Pio's story. We'd love to hear it because he's a favorite of ours as well. So thanks, Jill. God bless you. Have a beautiful rest of your day.
Hey, I just want to comment real quick. I've got a telephone next to me here, and
is that your telephone going off?
Well, it's actually Lamb Radio's phone, and that is a great sound. I didn't silence the phone, but I just, as a reminder, I'm at Lamb Radio in South Dakota. They're going to wrap up their fall pledge drive today with a record. In fact, they've already passed their previous best pledge drive ever, and they've still got until 6 p.m. Central Time today. So, again, I just I only bring that up because I want Debbie and I really want to insist that those of you who listen to EWTN, support your local Catholic radio station. Without them, our show would have no place to air, and boy, do we need Catholic radio and media today now more than ever. So please be generous when your station comes on the air. And my company, Debbie, and I work together with many others to go host pledge drives. If any of our affiliates would like help with that, let us. Maybe you've got it all taken care of. But if you think you can take it to another level, we would be happy to try and help you do that. Look at that, there's another pledge call coming in.
That's amazing. Okay,
Sorry
Jerry.
about that, everybody.
No, I just want to say too, Jerry, just for correction, Jerry, I see where you got the information from EWTN.com. You got that it's September 20th. 1918 that he received the stigmata. 1910 he became a priest. I guess where the problem lies is where it's focused on is that I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he received some signs of the stigmata earlier on. The full stigmata where it was bleeding and it smelled like roses, that came later. Came later. Yeah, so isn't that interesting? So that's why the different accounts. I just wanted to clarify that. Okay, sorry about that.
All right. Take two with Jerry and Debbie talking about Padre Pio, Saint Pio on his feast day. We're going to go to Austin, who is listening to EWTN Radio on Guadalupe Radio in Midland, Texas. Hello, Austin. You're on the air with us. How are you?
Hey, good. How are y'all?
Better now that you called.
Great. Happy feast day of St. Pio.
Yeah.
I wanted to just call and just give a little bit of story on my relationship and then how I was drawn to St. Padre Pio. I'd always been drawn to him, and I was in the bookstore in San Antonio years ago, and I had bought the book by Renzo Allegri on his life, St. Padre Pio's life, and it wasn't until a couple of years later, because I didn't finish the book. It was in storage, and it wasn't until a couple of years later I was able to finish the book. And I think it came at the right time for me to read about his life and what it did for me. His life story just brought me so much closer to my relationship with Jesus. That's what he did. That's what it did for me, and I believe that's what he wants for all his spiritual children. Of course. And it was a great. I would love to read the book again and just follow constant things on social media. They always have testimonies and stories of people who came to him in Italy, and it's just wonderful. And I know he's present. I know he prays for me and my family. One of the things I really wanted to mention today was that quote that I read once he takes on a spiritual soul, a son or daughter, he takes on their entire family. And I have asked his prayers for my family, especially my grandmother, who hasn't been doing very well in health this year. His feast day today is a perfect day because it wasn't 2 nights ago. I had a dream, and Padre Pio was in my dream, and we were at my grandmother's house, and it was one of the most peaceful dreams to have him there, and we were all at peace. We were at my grandmother's house, and it wasn't until yesterday when I called my mother and asked how my grandmother was doing, and she was doing the best she's been doing in the past few months.
Oh, thank God.
And she was able to go shopping for a dress for my cousin's wedding coming up in October. She's able to do these things, these normal things she hasn't been able to get around very well lately. So it's a wonderful, beautiful thing that I think he's really made his prayers known, that he's really helping and praying for my family.
Austin, that's beautiful. And this is really true of all of the saints, Debbie, as you know, and Austin, you know, and all of our listeners, I think, have at least some sense of this, some maybe a more heightened sense than others. But the reason the God gives us the communion of saints as our older brothers and sisters, and that we can seek their intercession. They are, of course, alive in Christ. They are not dead. They're more alive than we are. They're more alive than they were on earth because they have the fullness now, the fullness of life in and through Jesus. And it is in Christ, and that Christ somehow mystically, known only to God, enables them to hear our prayers, and then they can be solicitous of us. They can care for us. They can pray and intercede for us. And I love, Debbie, this whole idea of Padre Pio having spiritual children. He really saw himself as a father, a spiritual father. And just imagine how many people around the world, Debbie, that he has been a spiritual father to, including Austin and his family.
It's beautiful. Austin, you're blessed. And you have Padre Pio actively working in your life and your family's life. It's way to go. He's very active. We know that. And he said he would be in the eternal life, and he has been. So stay with us. We're celebrating the feast day of St. Padre Pio. He may be your favorites. He's ours.
I'm Raymond Arroyo with Mother Angelica, A Remarkable Life. In 1953, young Sister Angelica was cleaning a floor here at Sancta Clara Monastery in Canton, Ohio. She was using one of those mechanized scrubbers. It flew out of control and threw her to the floor, injuring her spine. 3 years later, finding it difficult to walk, she had to undergo a painful surgery. Shortly before that surgery, she made a promise to build a monastery to God's glory in the South. She would make good on that promise, establishing her monastery in Birmingham, Alabama. Stay with EWTN as we celebrate the life of Mother Mary Angelica.
Rory's an incredibly fit young man in training with the Marines. One of his comrades is flat out chubby. During training, they had to do 60 burpees in 8 minutes. If you don't know what that is, Google it. It's a painful exercise. Marines were snickering at Rory's friend and he was about to give up. Rory got right in his face and shouted above all the other voices, "You look at me. All you see is me. All you hear is my voice. You can do this." And he did. A week later, Rory's commander gave him the challenge. "Everyone do 60 burpees in 8 minutes. Rory, you do 80 burpees in 6 minutes. At the end of his strength and unable to go on, his friend ran out of nowhere to his side. "Rory, you look at me. You can do this." And he did. When life's exhausting you and negative voices cause self-doubt to creep in, Jesus is there at your side, shouting at you, "You listen to me. All you hear is me. All you see is me. You can do this." Listen to him, friends. This is Chris Stefanik from RealLifeCatholic.com on EWTN Radio.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
All right, we thank Austin again for his call in Midland, Texas. Thanks, Austin. Hope you have a blessed day, and we're continuing along here. Take two with Jerry and Debbie. Today is the feast of St. Padre Pio, and we are asking for your takes on him, maybe his spiritual role in your life. Maybe you were like Mr. Frost. You got to see the relic, Padre Pio's heart, in the Boston area, or maybe he has been instrumental in possibly answering a prayer that you had to God. So let us hear from you.
I was just wanting to affirm Jill, who called in, who shared about the accident she had and the September 7th correlation. Jerry, it is on EWTN.com also. So Padre Pio did receive the first stigmata September 7th, 1910. So she read the book correctly. And then he asked to have it removed because the pains were so great and it was annoying. See, Padre Pio had a passion. He had that Italian passion. I mean, he was born Francesco Forgione. I mean, he had that strong Italian blood. And then it came back on September 20th, 1918. So yes, 1918, right? Right. Did we get that correct? Good. Yeah. But see, it's interesting. But see, he was human, that human side of him. It was annoying. It was painful. He asked God to remove it. And God did for a while. But see, he was so closely, had such a close relationship with the divine that God blessed him with these many spiritual gifts. I mean, he's an incorrupt too. Keep in mind, he's an incorrupt. If you go to San Giovanni Rotondo, you will see him laid out. His face does have a bit of a little bit of a wax covering, but he is an incorrupt saint, which means he didn't decompose. So it's absolutely amazing. Okay, Scott. Portland, Oregon. You're listening to EWTN Radio on the EWTN app. Hi, Scott. Welcome to Take Two. What's your take on Padre Pio?
Yeah, I just wanted to share a little experience that I had in my life from Padre Pio. I was going through a very, very dark part of my time, which it included a separation from my wife. And as I was going through that, I was talking with my sister. She said, you should look to Padre Pio. And she sent me his book. I don't know. I read in the book that there was a number of them. I'm not sure which one it was. And so I read the book, and I could just identify with this man in so many areas, not so much the spiritual part, but just his characteristics as a person. And so I read the book, and, was just been praying to him. And then all of a sudden I found a Padre Pio, or it's called My Padre Pio prayer book, on my computer desk, and that's where I do all of my reading. And pretty much everything there is fairly recent. And I really was just like at a loss because I'd never seen this book. It was sitting there right on top of all the papers we all have on our desks. And so I started reading it, and it was just absolutely amazing. it gave me so much comfort. And one of the previous callers said that he takes on the families of your spiritual children, and so I felt a lot of comfort in that with my wife and her conversion and all of this. And one of the most striking quotes that I read in this prayer book is, "I will stand at the gates until all of my spiritual children entered." And another one is, "I love the souls," I believe is how it says, "the souls of my spiritual children, even maybe more than my own." And that's just coming from such a humble man. It's just unbelievable. And one more thing, it's just, I'm a truck driver, and I would always grab my Padre Pio prayer book and whatever book I'm reading at the time and take it with me on the road. I'm only gone for a couple of days. And every once in a while, I would forget my Padre Pio book. And one time, I would just kind of absent-mindedly thought to myself, I really need another Padre Pio book, one for my truck and one for my home. And within just a couple of days, there was another Padre Pio book on my desk. And my mom has been sending me Catholic literature for, decades. And all of that stuff is, it's in my closet. So I don't know if I had it before and it was in the closet, and he brought it out for me a couple of times. I'm not really sure the origin of it, but when I needed them both times, they were right there on my computer desk. And to me, that's just utterly amazing.
Mm-hmm. He's active.
Yeah, we were talking with some other people. Really, all of the callers so far today, Scott, have just had a really strong connection with Padre Pio, and this is something God can do. God is omnipotent. God can do anything, and like we said before, it's we can pray to the saints because they're in Christ, and the saints can effect things like this because Christ would will it and make it happen as well. Mm-hmm. Christ is the ultimate in generosity, in sharing his power and his love, and I also love, Debbie, what Scott said about Padre Pio caring more for the souls of his spiritual children than his own. That sounds like a father. A father would feel that way.
Oh yeah, he's amazingly generous, Padre Pio, and I would highly recommend, if you can get to San Giovanni Rotondo. I've been there; it's absolutely amazing. I could have lived there. It was so beautiful and peaceful, and you see the beautiful church up on the hill that was built, and you can see all of the elements of when he lived, his bed, with the altar where he said daily mass, and you see that all the letters of everybody from around the world, Jerry, that would send it to Padre Pio. They covered up a whole entire wall, and they were stuffed in there. These letters are in these bookcases. And those of you who've been to San Giovanni Rotondo, call in and share with me how amazing that was, because I remember asking the question of the person that was monitoring the building. I said, "So how many letters are there?" And he goes, "Oh no, ma'am. Those are just letters from 1 year to Padre Pio. 1 year. And they covered up a whole entire wall. This is why he was so active, and that's why God gifted him with the gift of bilocation. But Padre Pio was known to be in other areas of the world at the same time he was sitting with his friars in the monastery. I mean, it's amazing. He would close his eyes and drop his head, and he'd fold his arms, and they would all know he was off to some other place helping his spiritual sons and daughters. So
didn't he personally reply to every letter, or am I thinking of somebody else?
No, you're absolutely correct. And there were several different ways that he could do it. He would sometimes send his angels. The angels would talk to that spiritual son or daughter. So he enlisted a lot of help from heaven. I guess. Yeah. Yes. And so he was very active, or he had that gift of prophecy. It was amazing, but he was so humble. If you saw how he lived, it almost looked like a prison cell. I'll be really honest with you. That's how he lived. And he was so beautiful. And now he said he was going to do more work for us in heaven. And he is, by your testimonies today. Okay, Richard, you are up next. Thanks for being so patient. Thanks, Scott, and God bless you. Thanks for the call and a wonderful story you shared with us today. It inspired us. Richard, you're listening in Michigan. Hi, welcome to Take Two.
Hi. Thank you for having me on. I want to mention my voice is a little bit weak because I had surgery over the past weekend, but I'm coming along. But I hope you can hear me well. My parents were living down in Dunellen, Florida. They were attending St. John the Baptist Church down there, and my wife and I were visiting. They had a Bible study with a couple of parishioners. One couple, he was an aerospace engineer, a doctorate, and she had introduced to me as someone who had a BS degree, a Bachelor of Science, Master's degree, MS, in marine biology. And my mom said, you've got great devotion to Padre Pio. Yolanda here was healed by Padre Pio. And I said, you're kidding me. And this was during the time that Padre Pio was alive. And the story that she relayed was this. They had two sons, 11 and 9, and Gil was there. He was Jewish at this time. They were raising the children Catholic, but he was Jewish. And she had great devotion to Padre Pio. The problem for her was she had been writing to Padre Pio for some time that she, as you were talking about, was going to try to visit him in San Giovanni Rotondo. But as it turned out, she had cancer, and it advanced so vigorously, so aggressively, that the doctor had told her, you don't have much time. And she had just gone to the doctor, and he said, I don't think you've got 10 days. And she said, but I've got to go to San Giovanni Rotondo. And Gil said, you can't do it. It's impossible. And so she was so weakened, anybody's ever cared for somebody dying, she was in the living room. They had the bed set up in the living room so they could easily go out the door for emergency runs to the hospital. Well, this one night, the 11-year-old, as I understand, was out. The 9-year-old boy was home. And at 7 o'clock, she's there, and through the front door comes Padre Pio, right through. And she says, Gil, it's Padre Pio. And she says, just show you how stupid I am. She says, I went and knelt down. I had a picture on where I had my rosary on the counter or on the bedstand, and I'm kneeling there. She says, just to show you how dumb I am. Well, she wasn't stupid. And she turned and she says, Gil, can you see him? He says, no, but I can feel his presence right here. She says, that's exactly where he is. And she says to her son, can you see him? And the little boy says, no, Mommy, but I can smell roses. And she says, all of a sudden, I'm looking at Padre Pio. He's had this beautiful beatific type of emanation coming out of him. And she said he was raising his hand in blessing, so I knelt down, put my head down, and all of a sudden I felt like electricity coming from the top of my head down to the heels of my feet and my toes. And she said, all of a sudden, she says, Padre Pio's gone. She says, Gil, I'm healed. He said, what? She says, I'm healed. And all of a sudden she had her energy back. She was normal. They're jumping around. They're all excited. They go to the doctor the next day, who had x-rays of her with the malignancy in the bones and everything else. It was general. And he took x-rays, nothing, negative. And she says, Padre Pio, it's a miracle. He did it. And he says, no, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in that stuff. Come back if you have any more problems, which is kind of weird. But anyway, that's what he said with all that evidence. They're driving home. They turn the radio on, and they hear the news. Padre Pio had died the night before.
Wow.
You heard about him multi-locating? That's what he stopped in on Yolanda. So they get home, and they're driving up, and they see on the porch, they had a mailbox there, letters sticking out. And they came up, and the letter on the top was from San Giovanni Rotondo. And they opened it up, and it said it was written in English by the secretary for Padre Pio. I think it might have been Father Alessio. I don't know who it was. But the letter read, Dear Yolanda, Padre Pio says to tell you, you won't have to come here to see him. And Gil looks and he says, that's it, I'm becoming Catholic.
No. Oh, my goodness.
And so I'm talking to her like 1991 in the living room, and I'm looking at Gil and says, yep, it happened. I thought, well, there you go.
Wow.
Yeah.
And has that miraculous story, has that changed your faith walk, your life, and all the people that you share this with, and the family members that have experienced it? What else has it done in the future generations? What has it done? Have you continued that story in your life?
Oh, I told to people. It's never been published. Yolanda fell asleep in the Lord somewhere in the mid-1990s.
Okay.
And I never was able. I tried to call the rectory and find out if I could get a hold of Gil, and they lost track. After the death of a spouse sometimes. So I don't know. I know that they have 2 children. Mm-hmm. And so I'm hoping that, they hear this. It would be a wonderful story for them to publish about their mother. So I'm not going to give any last name on there, but Again, that was
Beautiful.
a very, very beautiful and impressive first-hand account of a healing. And so I just wanted to call today, and it was, again, tonight that this happened when he had healed Yolanda back in '68. So it's very timely.
Yes,
Wow.
absolutely. Wow.
Richard,
Wow.
thank you. Thank you. You've really blessed us by sharing that. And there are so many stories like that. Richard, we bless you and ask God to bless you. And Padre Pio to bless you, St. Pio, for being with us here on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. By the way, tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern, EWTN Television will broadcast the Holy Mass live from Boston's Cathedral of the Holy Cross in commemoration of St. Padre Pio's feast day. The Mass will be celebrated by His Eminence, Cardinal Sean O'Malley, and it is part of that relic tour of the heart of St. Padre Pio, and this is the first time a major relic of this saint has ever left Italy. So 7 p.m. Eastern Time tonight on EWTN Television. We have to lavish our Patience Award on Phil in New York, listening to EWTN Radio on the Station of the Cross. Phil, you've been holding on a long time, and I'm sure you've got something great to share with us. Thanks for waiting, sir.
Thank you for taking my call, Jerry and Debbie. When I was about 11 years old, I had picked up, I believe it was a paperback book about St. Pio. And what always interested me was he would go into his room and lock the door, and he would fight with the devil. There were times in which he would really get beat up, but what always got me was his trust in Christ. And his trust in Christ has helped me throughout my life in gaining more and more trust in Christ. And I just wanted to share that with you.
Well, what more could you ask for, really, Phil? And Debbie, you know this too. We are all called to trust. And if you look at the life of St. Padre Pio, it was a life of incredible trust. For example, Debbie, you mentioned the living conditions that he had. Very, 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 very simple. In fact, almost, I don't know what you would call it, very austere.
Yes.
And he would eat so little, just a few hundred calories a day,
Right.
that his brother friars were reported as saying that isn't enough nourishment to sustain a small child.
Right.
And so these are ways that he showed trust in God.
Absolutely.
And we learn these lessons from saints like Padre Pio.
Well, there's so much to learn about Padre Pio, and I would recommend that our listeners please go to EWTNRC and get some books or the DVDs or CDs on Padre Pio, because what Phil is saying is so correct. He had so much trust in God, and so no wonder the dark side showed itself to him and tried to fight with him, and he had to fight it off, and he had to stay in that trust. And you're right, Jerry, there's stories about how he lived, I think it was like 20 days only on the Eucharist, and they had no idea how he was sustaining himself. He had a tremendous trust, a tremendous connection, and just like how Richard was sharing that miraculous story about his friend, the interesting thing, Jerry, is that that's how he worked. He was so connected, it was fluid for him. His ministry, it was fluid. He could connect with the spiritual sons and daughters. He could talk, he conversed with the angels. It was so natural to him. That's what I was looking for. It was natural to him. And that's what was beautiful about Padre Pio. That's why I have to tell you, he's one of my favorites. I'm going to keep saying it, because if you come to my house, you'll see tons of stuff about Padre Pio around my house. Anything else, Phil? Does that kind of affirm what you're saying?
Yeah, basically that affirms what I'm saying. It always stuck with me, like I said, since I was 11 years old, and he had that complete trust in God, even when he got beat up by the adversary.
That's right. Right, or humiliated. He was humiliated by people around him, and also his ailments, Jerry and Phil. He had tons of illnesses and things happening to him, and he was humiliated and demoralized at times from people around him, but he kept persevering. The trust was there. So, Phil, right on with that. That helps us today. Thank you. Sorry, Jerry.
Thank you,
so
Phil,
passionate.
for the call. No, thanks for the call, Phil. We appreciate that. And we should mention, too, by the way, that I believe Padre Pio did pray and ask God and I think he discussed this with his spiritual director, to be a victim soul. to suffer in this life for the cause of other people. So
Wow.
it was something that he sought. He was obviously had to be inspired by God to, first of all, to seek that, and sustained by God through all of it to be able to bear up under all of that. So thanks, Phil, very much. We're going to go to some other folks who have been waiting. Tom, listening to EWTN Radio on Sirius XM 130 in Pennsylvania. Hi, Tom. Thank you for calling Take Two with Jerry and Debbie.
Hi, Jerry and Debbie. How you doing? Wanted to let you know that, and if you could shine some light on this, on Sunday I'm going to be taking a trip to the National Center for Padre Pio in Bartow, Pennsylvania. Have any of you been to that location?
I have not.
I have not. No. So
Okay.
what do you know?
Tell us about it.
Yes.
Well, I was kind of hoping you would tell me about it, but I will say one thing. On Sunday, September 25th, there's going to be, actually this whole week, they're celebrating the feast. From 11 to noon, the precious relic of the blood of St. Pio is going to be venerated. They're having a conference from noon to 3:30 with the Ferrari art exhibit outdoors in front of Our Lady of the Grace Chapel.
Right.
There's also going to be from 2 to 3 another precious relic of the blood of St. Pio for veneration. And then at 3 p.m. they're having the Divine Mercy Chaplet. And then the center closes at 4. So I'm going to be going up there with a bunch of prayer requests for some of my clients who gave to me. And you were saying about the letters for 1 year that were written, and that was at the other site. Am I correct in saying that, Debbie?
Yes, the letters are in San Giovanni Rotondo.
And I'm sure there's a same kind of a prayer request at this site also. So I'm kind of anxious to see what it's about, and I'll tell you what, how about if next week I share my experience with you next week, so maybe you can pass the word along to some of your listeners.
That would be great.
It would, absolutely.
That would be great. I found a website. It's padrepio.org. That is, it's National Center for Padre Pio in Bartow, Pennsylvania, that you're talking about, Tom, and they have information about that. They're calling it the St. Pio Feast Day Weekend, and that starts actually today. Actually, it started. Let me see here. Well, it's shown. Well, anyway, go to padrepio.org and you will get information on that. So, yeah, Tom, please do call us back, will you?
Yeah, and I see that it says here the precious relic of the blood. Now, you had mentioned the heart in Cincinnati, correct?
Boston.
In Boston.
His heart's in Boston.
Okay, I'm wondering if the blood is one of the relics that is genuine at this site.
I would have to believe it is.
Well, yeah. Right, and when you go to San Giovanni Rotondo, you'll see the altar cloths where the stigmata that he had in his hands would be dripping, and it would drip onto the cloth. You saw you'd see the spots of blood everywhere, and on his vestments there were spots of blood. So I'm wondering if it's a piece of that, Tom. I don't know, and if that's what's being put in the reliquary. I don't know exactly. But what I would suggest, Tom, is if you can get close to the relic, put prayer cards of Padre Pio up against it, because then it becomes what, Jerry, a third-class relic or something like that?
Yeah, third-class relic.
Yeah, so Tom, try to get as close as you can, and yeah, please bring all our Take Two listeners' prayer intentions as well. We have them on the prayer wall on the Jerry and Debbie site. If you could remember all of us at Take Two, we would appreciate it, Tom.
I'm writing it down because this is going to be incredible, and I can't wait to share what I experienced with you the next time we speak.
We look forward to it. Thank you, Tom. You are a good man, a man of God, and we do look forward to hearing from you. Again, at padrepio.org, I'm looking at the schedule for tomorrow, and it does say from 2 to 3, precious relic of the blood of St. Pio for veneration. So they do apparently have a relic of his blood there. That is in Bartow, Pennsylvania. All right, we're going to get at least to Sonia, hopefully more people. Sonia listening to EWTN Radio on God's Love Radio in the home of my alma mater, Franciscan University, Steubenville, Ohio. Hi, Sonia. How are you?
Oh, I'm fine.
Good. We got about 2 minutes for you. Go ahead.
Okay, just wanted to, I never had devotion to Padre Pio until someone left a book about him in the chapel when I was having my adoration, and I ran after the woman to tell her that she had left her book there, and she said, "You can have it." So I took it, and I read it, and I was very moved by it. The thing that moved me very deeply was his his relationship with the soldiers during the war that were over in Europe. And his friendship extended even when they went back to America. And he talked about how he loved America. And I just felt that being his feast day today, it would be good to remind people, if they don't know that, about Padre Pio's love for America, to pray to him, especially for our country right now, and with all the terrorism and the upcoming election, because he loved America.
Absolutely, Sonia. I've read that as well. How much he loved the people, because the faithful would reach out to him, like you heard in previous stories. They would write to him, and they wanted to be adopted as his spiritual sons and daughters. And yes, I mean, there's even accounts that during in the war when Italy, San Giovanni Rotondo, that area there was still under Nazi control, there was stories of soldiers seeing Padre Pio in the air, protecting, because
I remember reading that.
Right, but Sonia, you know why? He promised the people of San Giovanni Rotondo he'd protect them, and he did.
And he did, and I'm sure he's going to pray for America now
too.
So.
Exactly. So let's all pray for Padre Pio. Let's all pray that Padre Pio intercedes and really does put his armor over the United States and to keep. Well, we're celebrating his feast days. You got to imagine that he's with us here right now, really just excited that we are even sharing the stories of the faithful. So how beautiful is that, Sonia? Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia, for the call. This is going to be tongue in cheek, folks, but there, I even think, you know, as powerful and all the things attributed to Padre Pio, he may be looking at the United States right now and feeling like a little overwhelmed with what he
what he promised.
He's up against, you know, because he promised to be solicitous of the United States. And Padre Pio, please, if you can do anything for us, we really could use it right now. A lot of things, a lot of important things going on. Debbie, amazing broadcast. Jesus, Andrea, Susie, all those we didn't get to. Sincere apologies, but you hear the music, folks. When the music starts, that is our indication we got to get out.
That's right. But please share your stories on EWTN Catholic Radio Facebook page. We'll interact with you. We'll comment. Share your stories. Keep them coming on Padre Pio. Celebrate today. Learn about Padre Pio. He's an amazing saint, and he's very active in our lives. He wants us to get to heaven. So thank you for everybody participating today.
Debbie and I would love to come out, be part of your community, a parish mission, a conference. We can do live radio broadcasts of Take Two right where you are. Go to take2show.com. You'll find the yellow J and D button. Click on that. It'll take you to our website for details. Debbie,
until then, have a beautiful and blessed day, week.